Picture a bustling public bus stand at night in Karnataka, India. I mean, the sensory overload is just immediate.
Well, absolutely. It's incredibly chaotic.
Right. You've got the constant aggressive hiss of air brakes from those massive state-run buses pulling in and out of their bays, the harsh glare of fluorescent lights cutting through, like this thick haze of diesel exhaust.
And you have vendors shouting over each other everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Selling keys, snacks, newspapers.
Exactly. It's the sheer press of hundreds of people moving in every conceivable direction. It is just a place of pure, unfiltered chaos.
It really is.
But now, I want you to filter out all that noise. Just focus on one single person in that massive crowd, a young woman.
Okay.
She's walking away from the main concourse, stepping out of that chaotic flow of traffic, and she's moving down a dimly lit corridor toward the public washroom.
And she's holding something.
Yeah, she is. In her hand, she is holding a single pill. And she believes this pill is a standard contraceptive.
Right, like a responsible medical precaution.
Exactly. She believes she's taking it ahead of her imminent wedding to the man she left waiting outside for her. I mean, she's walking into that washroom expecting a husband.
Yeah.
She is expecting a future.
A sense of security, finally.
Right. After years of financial struggle, she's expecting societal respectability. Instead, as she closes that flimsy cubicle door and swallows that pill, she is walking into her final moments on Earth.
It's an incredibly chilling image to open with.
It really is.
And I think the terror of that moment comes from how profoundly ordinary it is, right up until the exact second it becomes fatal.
Yeah.
Because, we are constantly conditioned by the media, we consume movies, thriller novels, even our own evolutionary defense mechanisms to look for monsters in the dark.
You want the bad guy to look like a bad guy.
Exactly. We ask ourselves what a serial killer looks like, and we instinctively expect the answer to be something obviously threatening, someone who exists entirely on the fringes of society.
Someone whose instability is visible from a mile away.
Right. But the terrifying truth you have to confront when looking at a case like this is that the most dangerous predators are almost never the ones howling in the darkness.
They're the ones standing right next to you.
They are. They are the ones who look completely, utterly unremarkable. The people who blend seamlessly into the background noise of our everyday lives.
And that concept is basically the core mission of today's deep dive.
Yeah, it is.
We are taking the source materials we've gathered, so the police reports, the intricate timelines, the court records, the sociological analyses, and we are using them to reconstruct the harrowing case of a man named Mohan Kumar.
A man who would later become infamous across India and eventually the world under the moniker Cyanide Mohan.
Right, and I want to be entirely clear right from the jump, this is not just a recitation of a true crime body count.
No, not at all.
This is a detailed exploration of a deeply disturbing psychological and systemic phenomenon. We're looking at how one single man managed to weaponize the societal institution of marriage itself.
He took the most basic, fundamental human desire for a better future, for companionship, for economic stability, and he just engineered it into a trap.
A trap that systematically claimed the lives of 20 women between the years 2004 and 2009.
20 women. It's staggering.
So, okay, let's unpack this. We have to start by examining the life of a man who managed to hide this massive volume of crimes behind the most mundane, respectable facade imaginable.
Well, the construction of that facade is honestly a study in sociological camouflage. If we look at his background, Mohan Kumar was born in 1963 in the state of Karnataka.
And he didn't come from money, right?
No, not at all. He didn't come from wealth or privilege or powerful lineage. He was born into a poor family. But he did exactly what the prevailing societal narrative tells you to do to elevate your station in life.
He went to school.
Exactly. He studied, he got an education, and he achieved a very specific, highly valued, kind of respectable status by becoming a primary school teacher.
Which is huge.
It is, and we really have to pause and deeply consider what that profession means in the context of rural and semi-urban Indian society.
Right, because it's not just a job.
Exactly. A primary school teacher is not merely a government employee drawing a paycheck. It is a position endowed with immense community trust. A teacher represents authority, secular education, and, well, a perceived moral standing.
He's a pillar of the community.
He is, and he lived a life that perfectly mirrored the expectations of his community. He married his first wife, he married a second time, he eventually had children.
So on paper, he's perfect.
Completely. To the outside world, to his neighbors, to his fellow faculty members, he was quiet, responsible, and entirely normal.
See, this functions as a massive structural blind spot.
How so?
Well, think of society like a sprawling building. When we are looking for threats to the structure, we check the dark alleys around it, right? We look at the shadows in the basement. We look for obvious cracks in the foundation.
Right, the obvious hazards.
Exactly. We never suspect the load-bearing pillars. The teacher, the family man, the government employee. These are the pillars holding up a local community. You do not look at the primary school teacher walking down the street and see a lethal threat.
You really don't.
His background of poverty made him deeply relatable to the people he would eventually target, while his hard-won profession made him instantly respectable. He operated right in the dead center of society, in plain sight.
Plain sight.
But I look at this guy's resume, wife, kids, steady government job, a community that respects him. I just can't bridge the gap. I mean, you don't just wake up one Tuesday and decide to murder 20 people because you're bored.
No, of course not.
So if his life was so ordinary, how does a primary school teacher suddenly pivot to becoming a serial killer? What was the catalyst?
Well, the sources suggest the catalyst was much more insidious than a sudden cinematic snap into madness. It wasn't like he just lost his mind one day.
So it was gradual.
Very. It was a calculated, slowly dawning realization over time. Mohan discovered a profound vulnerability woven into the social fabric around him.
What kind of vulnerability?
He realized that trust is not a static, earned condition. Trust is a mechanism that can be artificially manufactured, manipulated, and ruthlessly exploited.
Wow. Okay.
He saw that the societal pressure on families regarding marriage and the sheer desperation that pressure created was so overwhelmingly powerful that it could blind people to glaring red flags.
So he preyed on that desperation.
Exactly. He engineered a meticulously crafted formula for deception. It was a blueprint that relied entirely on taking a woman's deepest hopes and fears and turning them into the very mechanism of her destruction.
Let's lay out the mechanics of that formula, because the specificity of it is just devastating. Mohan didn't just cast a wide net into the world and take whoever crossed his path, did he?
No, he was incredibly specific. He profiled a very precise demographic. He exclusively targeted unmarried women.
Unmarried women.
And specifically, those hailing from families that were visibly struggling financially.
And his hunting grounds were incredibly consistent, right? The records show he spent his time scouring transit hubs, mostly major bus stands across Karnataka.
Yes. Places like Mangaluru, Bantwal, Mysuru, Hassan, Matikuri, and even the sprawling metropolis of Bengaluru.
So big crowds, lots of transient movement. And his initial approach was always the same, right?
Always. He would strike up a conversation, build a fast rapport, and eventually offer a promise of marriage.
Just like that?
Just like that. But the fatal hook was that he offered this marriage without the traditional financial burdens that normally accompany it.
Oh, okay.
Furthermore, he almost never used his real name or background.
Right, the aliases.
Yeah. To one woman, he was Sudhakar. To another, he was Shashitar. The case files note that he would actively adapt his own surname, his claimed caste, and his community identity to perfectly match the background of the specific woman he was courting.
I mean, the predatory genius of this targeting strategy just cannot be overstated.
It really is sinister.
Because in many parts of India, particularly for families already trapped in economic hardship, the prospect of marrying off a daughter is a source of immense, sometimes suffocating financial anxiety.
Absolutely. The cultural expectations surrounding weddings, the hosting of the community, and specifically the dowry demands, they can be completely crippling.
Right, they can plunge a family into generational debt.
Exactly. So when a respectable-looking man who frequently claimed to be a government employee with a steady pension, by the way, approaches a family and offers an honorable marriage while explicitly waving away all those financial burdens, he isn't just offering romance.
He's throwing out a financial lifeline.
An irresistible financial lifeline. He is answering the deepest, most desperate prayers of the woman and her entire family.
And the use of aliases, I mean, that is a masterclass in psychological manipulation. By adapting his name, his surname, and his supposed caste to mirror hers, he completely bypasses the natural wariness humans have of outsiders.
He artificially manufactures an immediate sense of kinship and shared values.
But here's the thing. I struggle to believe this formula worked smoothly. 20 separate times. I really do.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
I try to put myself in the position of these women. Taking a random pill from a man you just met in a noisy bus station, agreeing to travel to a lodge in a strange city, wouldn't basic human survival instinct kick in at some point?
They would think so.
No matter how desperate the financial situation, how is he bypassing the natural internal alarm bells that scream, this is a bad idea? Bus stands are crowded, chaotic places. How do you isolate someone in the middle of a crowd?
That is the most common reaction when reviewing the case files. but it underestimates the power of the illusion he built. Think of it less like a stranger offering candy and more like a highly skilled, incredibly dark version of a corporate salesman.
Okay, a salesman.
Imagine a salesman in a bustling, overpacked market. He doesn't shout at the crowd to buy his wares, he watches. He observes body language, clothing, demeanor.
Profiling them?
Yes. He finds the one single person who is desperately looking for exactly what he is selling. He approaches them quietly. Because he has mirrored their caste and background, he speaks their specific dialect.
Oh, wow.
He understands their cultural touchstones. He validates their anxieties about money and family pressure. Within minutes, through active listening and intense focus, he makes them feel like they are the only two people in that chaotic market.
So he just tunnels their vision.
Exactly. The survival instinct doesn't kick in because he never presents himself as a threat. He presents himself as the solution to every problem they have.
He validates their reality so completely that they just stop questioning his.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And once that alias was accepted, once the promise of a burden-free marriage was locked in, Mohan initiated the next phase of his routine. A routine that was terrifying precisely because it was so rigid and unvarying.
Right, the blueprint.
The relationship, once established, would always culminate in a physical journey. They would travel to another city, far from the woman's home district, under the guise that this was the trip where the wedding would finally take place.
Or perhaps where they would visit a specific regional temple to formalize their union.
Right, and they would check into a modest lodge together. And then came the final, fatal step, a trip back to a local bus stand.
This is where it gets incredibly grim.
At this point, Mohan would hand the victim a pill. He explicitly told them it was a contraceptive. The instruction was that she needed to take it to prevent pregnancy before they consummated the marriage or moved forward with their life together.
And the woman, trusting him entirely as her soon-to-be husband, would take the pill.
She would walk into a public washroom to consume it, but the pill was laced with cyanide. She would consume it, and within mere minutes, her body would shut down.
And meanwhile, Mohan would simply wait outside. He would confirm the commotion when she was discovered, and then casually walk back to the lodge or slip away, taking all of her jewelry and valuables with him.
We have to dissect the specific choice of the contraceptive lie because it is the linchpin of his entire operation.
It really is. I mean, why call it a contraceptive? Why not tell them it's vitamin or a headache pill or motion sickness medication for the bus ride?
Right.
Because labeling it a contraceptive accomplishes two absolutely critical things for the killer. First, it ensures the victim takes it entirely willingly and perhaps even eagerly because she believes it is a responsible, necessary step for the future they are about to begin.
It acts as a physical confirmation of the marriage illusion.
Exactly. Second, and much more importantly for his operational security, modesty and deeply ingrained societal norms dictated that a woman in that cultural setting would never, ever take a contraceptive pill openly in a public concourse.
Right. It was a private, deeply intimate act.
The lie organically forced her to isolate herself. She would naturally seek out a closed public washroom cubicle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. It is essentially a deadly magic trick. Cyanide is a notoriously fast-acting poison.
Very fast.
It doesn't give you hours to wander around feeling ill. It gives you minutes, sometimes seconds, before massive cellular hypoxia sets in. The misdirection of the magic trick is the fake medical precaution.
Right.
The genius of it is that the victim essentially locks herself in a box before the poison takes effect. By the time the cyanide actually shuts down her respiratory system, she is behind a closed door, entirely out of sight.
This method created an unbreakable physical distance between Mohan and the victim at the exact time of death.
No one sees them interacting at the moment she collapses.
Exactly. No one hears a struggle because there is no physical struggle. It allows him to literally just turn around and walk out of the bus station unnoticed, carrying her jewelry.
Which, let's not forget, is the ultimate financial motive layered right over the top of the psychological thrill of the killing.
Precisely. He successfully monetized the murders. And because of the physical distance created by the washroom door, he left behind a crime scene that was incredibly difficult for local authorities to interpret accurately.
Right, because you have a woman deceased in a public toilet with no obvious signs of blunt force trauma.
No bruising, no defensive wounds, no weapon left behind. Just a sudden, completely unexplained death of a seemingly healthy young woman.
But I have to stop here, because this is where the logistics of the investigation start to baffle me.
Okay.
We need to talk about the cyanide itself.
Okay.
How does a primary school teacher, a guy grading spelling tests in a rural village, get his hands on a steady supply of industrial-grade cyanide for 5 years? I mean, it's not exactly something you pick up at the local pharmacy.
It's a critical question, and it speaks to his knowledge of local industries. In many parts of India, particularly in towns with robust local artisan markets, cyanide is not an impossible substance to acquire if you know the right cover story.
Wait, really? What kind of cover story?
Well, it is frequently used by goldsmiths and jewelers for polishing gold and extracting silver.
Oh, wow.
So a respectable-looking teacher walking into a chemical supplier or approaching a jeweler, claiming he needs a small amount for his school science experiment or to clean family heirlooms, it wouldn't necessarily trigger a massive alarm.
Because of his status.
Exactly. He only needed incredibly small doses for each victim. His societal standing allowed him to bypass the scrutiny that a less respectable person might face when trying to purchase a lethal chemical.
So he has the poison, he has the method, and he leaves 20 bodies in highly trafficked public spaces across the state of Karnataka.
20 bodies.
I'm looking at this map of 20 dead women in transit hubs, and I just cannot fathom how a police department doesn't see a serial killer operating right under their noses. It feels like an impossible level of incompetence.
I know, it seems that way.
How do 20 women die in identical circumstances over 5 years without anyone connecting the dots?
It is easy to view it as incompetence in hindsight, but to understand the failure, you have to understand the systemic blind spots of the era.
We're talking roughly from 2004 to 2009.
Right. This is a textbook example of the silo effect in law enforcement, operating in an environment largely devoid of real-time, digitized, statewide crime databases.
So everything is on paper.
Everything. When a body was found, because there was no obvious bloody violence, these deaths were not immediately flagged as homicides. They were logged in local police registers under a specific classification, unnatural death reports.
Or in many cases, simply as suspected suicide.
Because they assume a young woman who ingested poison in a bathroom must have done it to herself.
Exactly. And crucially, because Mohan was constantly changing his locations, moving his attacks from Mangaluru to Mysuru to Bengaluru, the data generated by his crimes was totally fragmented.
Across different towns and completely different police jurisdictions.
Right. One local police station in a coastal town has a paper file for a suspected suicide. Another station, 50 miles inland, has a paper file for an unexplained unnatural death. They were completely disconnected silos of information.
So what does this all mean? Did he know he was exploiting a jurisdictional loophole, or was he just lucky?
Honestly, it's an optical illusion of scale. Think of it this way. If you are a local inspector and you're looking for one individual puzzle piece, a young woman found dead, traveling with a man who vanished, missing her jewelry, no violent trauma, it just looks like a tragic, isolated event.
Maybe she had an undiagnosed health issue.
Right, or maybe she was depressed and took her own life. You have to take a massive step back, take 20 of those identical puzzle pieces from all over the state, and lay them on the same table to suddenly see the horrifying picture of a prolific serial killer.
But there was no mechanism, no database, no central table to put those pieces on.
None at all.
Yeah.
He was protected by the very bureaucracy that was ostensibly designed to stop him. He knew that physical distance between his crimes and his own anonymity were his best defenses.
Because there was no automated system flagging the highly specific circumstances, the public washroom, the missing jewelry, the young unmarried demographic, the pattern remained invisible to the people whose job it was to look for it.
His perfect crime spree lasted for half a decade. Not because he was an invisible ghost leaving no trace, but because the traces he left were scattered to the wind across dozens of jurisdictions.
That invisibility lasted until one single family refused to accept the narrative handed to them by the state.
Yes, this is where it all changes.
They refused to let their daughter become just another disconnected paper file in a dusty cabinet. This is the pivot point of the entire narrative.
We are moving into June of 2009.
Right. We need to talk about Neetha Mulya. She was 22 years old, living in a place called Bari Maru in the Dakshina Kannada district. And one day, she simply vanished.
Just gone.
Her family went to the local authorities to report her missing. Initially, the police reaction was unfortunately exactly what you might expect, given the cultural context and her demographics.
They suspected she had simply eloped.
Yes. They assumed she left voluntarily to run away with a lover. But Anitha's family aggressively pushed back against this theory.
They knew their daughter.
They knew the realities of her life, and they knew she wouldn't just vanish without a word to them.
We absolutely must highlight the cultural hurdle that Anitha's family had to overcome in that local police station.
It was immense.
When a young, unmarried woman disappears in many traditional patriarchal societies, the default assumption by authorities is incredibly frequently the runaway bride scenario.
There is often a heavy social stigma attached to this assumption, a subtle implication that perhaps she brought shame to the family by eloping in secret.
Right. And for an overworked, under-resourced local police force dealing with petty theft and property disputes, writing it off as a domestic issue is just the path of least resistance.
It's the easy way out.
But the family's absolute, unyielding refusal to accept that dismissive narrative, their insistence that something nefarious and external had happened to Anitha, was the pivotal domino in the entire investigation.
If they had backed down out of shame or intimidation, Cyanide Mohan might have continued his spree for another decade.
Exactly. Their persistence effectively forced the police to change their methodology. They had to stop searching physical spaces like bus stands and local temples, and they had to start mapping digital connections.
They pulled her call detail records, her cell phone logs.
Right, and this is where the investigation shifts from analog police work to digital forensics.
Because up until this point, the police had no physical evidence connecting any bodies, no DNA left at the scenes, no murder weapon discarded in an alley, no eyewitnesses to a physical struggle.
Nothing.
The thing that cracked the case wasn't physical, it was raw, invisible data.
It's like pulling a single loose thread that eventually unravels an entire tapestry. They were looking at a blank radar screen, and suddenly they found a single anomalous ping on a network server. You follow that one ping, and it reveals an entire, massive hidden architecture.
And that hidden architecture led them straight into a web of numbers that completely obliterated their initial theory of a simple runaway bride.
What did the record show?
When investigators looked at Anitha's phone records, they saw that in the days leading up to her disappearance, she had engaged in repeated, lengthy phone calls with another specific woman.
Okay.
When the police eventually identified and looked into that second woman, they discovered a chilling fact. She was also listed as missing.
Wow.
So, the police pulled the second woman's phone records. Her network connections led them to a third woman's phone number, and they quickly found that the third woman had also vanished without a trace.
So a digital chain is forming right in front of their eyes on a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
Try to imagine the growing sense of dread in that detective's office. At this point, the police are looking at this tangled web of phone numbers, cross-referencing them with missing persons reports, and their immediate thought still isn't, we have a serial killer on our hands.
No, their immediate thought is organized crime.
Right. They suspect they have stumbled onto a massive, well-coordinated human trafficking or prostitution ring.
And honestly, it makes logical sense. You have multiple young women, all from financially vulnerable backgrounds, all connected by a hidden network of phone calls, all disappearing into thin air.
So the police mobilize based on that theory. They track the cell tower pings to specific lodges and hotels across the region. They gear up for a major bust.
They are looking for a syndicate. They expect to find muscle, handlers, a madam, an organized gang moving people across borders.
But when they kick the doors down at these lodges, what do they find?
They find absolute silence. They find empty rooms.
Nothing.
No gang. No organized network. No trafficking syndicate. This moment is a fascinating example of cognitive bias in criminal investigations.
Right.
Faced with multiple missing women linked by a complex network of communications, the logical leap for an investigator is a syndicate, because human trafficking is a known, pervasive, organized threat. The idea that a single individual was orchestrating a deception of this magnitude, coordinating all these moving parts, handling multiple victims simultaneously, traveling constantly, and executing perfect murders without anyone noticing, was almost too massive to comprehend initially.
The institutional mind just recoils from the idea of a lone predator being that prolific and that invisible.
Imagine being that detective. You think you're tracking a noisy, chaotic criminal organization, but the deeper you look, the quieter it gets.
Until you realize it's just one man operating entirely in the shadows.
Exactly. The digital trail of phone numbers gave the police a map of the connections. It gave them the how of the communication network. But raw data cannot be handcuffed. Phone numbers don't confess.
They still needed a name, and they still desperately needed a face to attach to this ghost. They needed a living witness who could tie a real human being to this terrifying web of missing girls.
And that requirement brings us to the ultimate breakthrough of the case. The phone trail eventually, inevitably, pointed toward a specific man, Mohan Kumar.
But even then, investigators faced profound cognitive dissonance. When they looked into the background of the man the cell towers pointed to, they saw the primary school teacher.
They saw the respected community member, the family man.
It simply did not fit their established profile of a mastermind predator or a trafficker.
The illusion of his respectability was so potent that it almost acted as a final barrier to its capture. But the investigators managed to bypass his current facade by looking deeply into his past associations. Through the phone records, they found a woman named Sumitra.
Sumitra is the unsung hero of this entire timeline. She is the one who got away.
Yes, she is.
Years earlier, Mohan had approached Sumitra and deployed his standard playbook. The smooth conversation, the promises of a better future, the burden-free marriage proposal. But for whatever reason, perhaps she sensed something was off. Perhaps the timing just wasn't right. Sumitra refused him.
She didn't take the bait.
She didn't. However, she remembered him. She knew his face, she knew his mannerisms, and crucially, she had recently seen him traveling in public with Anita Mulya, the very same 22-year-old woman whose disappearance sparked this entire digital manhunt.
If we analyze this from the perspective of predator psychology, it highlights a fatal, unavoidable flaw in Mohan's operational security.
What's that?
Serial predators very often return to familiar hunting grounds because it feels safe. They know the terrain, they know the rhythms of the people, they know the escape routes.
Right.
But by operating in the same general regions of Karnataka for over 5 years, Mohan mathematically increased his chances of eventually crossing paths with someone who knew his real identity.
Or at least recognized a previous alias.
Exactly, and who could physically connect him to a new victim. Sumitra was that statistical inevitability. Her ability to place the respectable teacher physically next to the most recent missing victim completely shattered the illusion Mohan had spent years building.
It gave the police the actionable human intelligence they needed to move in. So the police realize they have their man. They know who the ghost is, but they need to catch him in the open without spooking him into destroying evidence.
Right, they had to be careful.
They used Sumitra to arrange a meeting. The date is October 21st, 2009. I mean, try to put yourself in the middle of this sting operation and feel the incredible tension.
It must have been nerve-wracking.
Mohan Kumar walks into this designated meeting point. In his mind, he is completely in control of his environment. He is expecting to meet a woman from his past, perhaps thinking he can manipulate her again, or at least manage whatever social situation has arisen.
He thinks he is the spider sitting comfortably in the center of the web.
Right. He is completely blissfully unaware that the trap has already snapped shut around him. He walks in, and plainclothes police officers are waiting. The hunter instantly becomes the hunted. He is arrested on the spot.
It is a profound moment of reversal for a man who believed he was untouchable. But, as any seasoned investigator will tell you, an arrest is merely an accusation. It is the beginning of the legal process, not the end.
The hard part was just starting.
Exactly. The police now faced a monumental task: to build a case capable of proving 20 separate murders, especially murders where the physical evidence was deliberately obscured by the passage of time, the elements, and the initial guise of suicide. They needed to completely tear apart Mohan's secret life.
They needed tangible, physical proof to back up the invisible digital map they had drawn.
Which brings us directly to the search of his properties. When investigators finally breached Mohan's house and his private spaces, they found what I can only describe as a predator's trophy room, perfectly disguised as mundane household clutter.
Wow.
They found a stash of mobile phones belonging to the victims. They found heaps of jewelry. They found stacks of fake visiting cards with various aliases.
And counterfeit government seals, right?
Yes. And, of course, they found materials directly connected to the storage and use of cyanide.
Confronted with this overwhelming mountain of his own physical detritus, the facade finally broke. Mohan confessed. He painstakingly linked his own movements over the past 5 years to the dates and locations of those unidentified bodies found in the bus station toilets.
We really need to analyze that physical evidence closely because it tells a story all its own regarding his methodology. The fake visiting cards and the counterfeit government seals are particularly revealing.
I need to understand this part. A primary school teacher is walking around with counterfeit government seals. How does he even get those, and why are they so effective? It seems like an unnecessary risk, almost overkill for a marriage proposal.
It wasn't overkill. It was central to his authority.
Really?
Yes. India has a profound rubber stamp culture when it comes to bureaucracy. A government seal represents state backing, official verification, and untouchable authority. In many rural communities, a document with a government seal paralyzes questions.
People just accept it.
Completely. He likely had them made by local stamp makers, claiming he was replacing lost school equipment, or he simply forged them himself.
That's incredibly bold.
By using these seals on documents or identification, he proved to these financially struggling families that he was a man of substance. He wasn't just a guy at a bus stop. He was a man backed by the state, someone who could provide absolute security.
It was the ultimate tool for manufacturing trust.
Exactly. And the jewelry they found. The jewelry wasn't just stolen wealth to fund his life. Legally speaking, the jewelry was the physical tether. It was the undeniable chain linking this respectable teacher directly to the forgotten, unnamed bodies decomposing in distant morgues.
So the physical evidence proves the what? It shows he possessed their things, it shows he possessed the cyanide. But what the prosecution desperately needed to secure 20 convictions was something to prove exactly how it happened.
Right.
How did he convince them to leave their families? What were his exact words? How did the deception actually play out in real time? And miraculously, against all odds, they got it.
They did.
Because out of all the women he targeted and poisoned, there was one survivor. One woman who had been approached by Mohan, who had been dragged through the entire deceptive process, the false promises that traveled to the lodge, but who, through a twist of fate, survived the ordeal.
And that survivor's testimony was the absolute holy grail for the prosecution in this sprawling case.
I can imagine.
Physical evidence is static. It requires a lawyer's interpretation. But a survivor provides a living, breathing, real-time look inside the killer's psychological machinery.
She could articulate exactly how he identified vulnerabilities.
Yes. She explains step by step how he built trust, how he isolated her, and crucially, exactly how he introduced the concept of the contraceptive pill and the requirement for privacy.
She gave a powerful, undeniable voice to the 20 women who had been permanently silenced in those washrooms.
In a case where the killer's primary weapon was the enforced silence of his victims, having a survivor step into a courtroom, look him in the eye, and speak the truth was the most powerful counterweapon the state could possibly possess.
How crucial is a survivor's voice in a case like this, where the killer's main weapon was silence? It changes everything. It is the difference between a judge guessing what happened in that washroom and knowing it as an absolute horrifying fact.
Exactly.
So armed with Mohan's confessions, the mountain of physical evidence, the digital phone records, and this critical survivor's testimony, the investigation transitioned out of the police station and into the courtroom.
And this wasn't a quick, sensationalized trial that wrapped up in a few weeks.
No.
This became a grueling, years-long legal marathon that tested the endurance of every single person involved.
Let's walk through how that timeline unfolded. It started yielding initial results in December of 2013, right?
Yes. A trial court in Mangaluru officially convicted Mohan in 3 specific murder cases.
The cases of Anitha Mulya, whose family cracked the case, alongside victims Lilavati and Sunanda.
Right. And for these 3 murders, the court imposed the death penalty, but that was merely the opening act. Over the next several years, these cases naturally and necessarily moved through the appeals process to the higher courts.
And during that process, we saw the sentences get modified based on legal technicalities.
In one instance, the Karnataka High Court commuted a death sentence down to life imprisonment without the possibility of remission. In another case, they upheld and confirmed the death penalty.
Which seems complicated, but it's part of the process, isn't it?
It is a crucial, functional part of the justice process. They illustrate the incredibly complex, shifting nature of capital punishment jurisprudence in India and the rigorous nature of the appeals system.
Ensuring there are no loopholes.
Exactly. The high courts review everything to ensure that when a sentence is finalized, whether it is execution or life without parole, it is legally ironclad and beyond reproach. The state was ensuring that there were no procedural errors, no botched evidence handling that Mohan could exploit to walk free on a technicality years down the line.
And the trials just kept coming, year after year. In 2019, a decade after his arrest, he received another death sentence for the murder of an Anganwadi worker.
And for those who might not know, an Anganwadi worker is a rural childcare and public health worker in India. It's an incredibly vital community role, often severely underpaid.
The fact that he targeted an Anganwadi worker just further highlights his consistent predatory focus on women in low-income, service-oriented roles who were desperate for financial relief.
It's just so bleak.
Finally, in 2020, 11 long years after his arrest, the final gavel fell. He was convicted for the murder of a 25-year-old woman from Kasaragod, receiving a life sentence. That was his 20th and final conviction.
It's hard to even process that timeline.
Think about the stamina required by the prosecution, the detectives, and the victims' families. From 2009 to 2020, 11 years of constant, unyielding court battles. It is a stark reminder to all of us that catching a killer is a singular event, an arrest, but achieving justice is a very long, very exhausting, grinding process.
It is exhausting, but it is absolutely necessary. You cannot simply bundle 20 murders into one generic, overarching trial and declare him guilty of being the serial killer.
Right.
Our legal system demands that each victim receives their own individualized justice. Each of the 20 murders required its own presentation of evidence, its own specific witness testimonies, its own ruling defense cross-examinations, and its own discrete verdict from a judge.
It's a monumental administrative and emotional burden on the courts.
And more importantly, on the grieving families who have to relive the trauma repeatedly. But by prosecuting each case individually, the judicial system officially recognized the individual humanity of all 20 women.
They were no longer just anonymous numbers in a horrifying statistic, or forgotten files labeled unnatural death.
Exactly. They were recognized victims whose lives mattered enough to demand a separate public accounting from the man who stole them.
As we step back from the massive scope of this case, we have to look at the immense wreckage left behind. 20 women, 20 families permanently shattered, 20 futures stolen in the most calculated, intimate way imaginable.
It's a heavy legacy.
The legacy of Cyanide Mohan is often summarized by the sensational true crime details, right? The fast-acting poison, the ever-changing aliases, the stolen jewelry, the tragic scenes in the public washrooms. But the true weapon he wielded wasn't a chemical compound he bought from a jeweler.
No, it wasn't.
The true weapon was trust. It was the deeply human trust that a seemingly respectable stranger standing in a bus station was offering marriage, protection, and a shared future. He took that trust, wrapped himself in the camouflage of a completely ordinary, respectable life, and used it to destroy them.
Which brings us to a final, profound thought that you, the listener, need to carry with you. We can easily ask ourselves the procedural questions. How many lives could have been saved if that very first unexplained death in a washroom in 2004 had been treated not as a random suicide, but as part of a larger systemic pattern?
Yeah, if only the dots were connected sooner.
But we have to look deeper than just police bureaucracy and data management. We have to look at the societal blind spots that made these women vulnerable in the first place.
The systemic issues.
Yes. These 20 women were targeted specifically because they were financially struggling and feeling the immense, crushing cultural pressure to marry. The financial burden of a wedding, the expectations of dowry, the societal stigma of remaining unmarried as a woman. These were the actual structural tools Mohan used to corner his victims.
If society did not place such an overwhelming, burdensome price tag on marriage and respectability for women, would Mohan Kumar have had a hook to catch them with in the first place?
It forces you to look around your own world and wonder what other vulnerabilities are predators exploiting right now in our own communities simply because society has deemed those struggles normal.
That is exactly the question we need to leave you with today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope this exploration has given you a new perspective on how ordinary facades can hide extraordinary dangers, and how the systems we trust can sometimes fail the most vulnerable among us. Keep staying curious. Keep questioning the narratives of the world around you. And remember, the most dangerous threats don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they are standing right next to you in the bustling crowd, looking exactly like everyone else.